Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we're talking about two versions, two classics, dare I say. We're talking about The Shop Around the Corner, directed by Ernst Lubitsch in 1940, with James Stewart,
Margaret Sullivan, Frank Morgan.
And You've Got Mail, famously known as a remake of The Shop Around the Corner.
Yes.
And in fact, the little bookshop owned by Meg Ryan's character is called The Shop Around the Corner. So that's Meg Ryan, Tom Hanks. And the fundamental similarity that the films share is these two people are having a correspondence. In 1940, it's pen pals. And in 1998, it's over email and AOL Instant Messenger, as it was at the time. And they happen to know each other in real life. They don't know who they are anonymously, and they get on very well in their anonymous correspondence and not very well in real life.
Which is another similarity.
Well, that is the central... I'd say that's the central similarity.
Okay, well, in that case, it has more. Yeah, it has moments of dialogue that repeat. It has the whole sequence where they're waiting to meet each other on their first date. The male protagonist knows who the female protagonist is and not the other way, and that's a central kind of turning point in the story.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you know, it structurally, it is really based. It's a remake. It is. You know.
The original
it's acknowledged as a remake. Actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And the original film was based on a play.
The original film was based on a play, and actually there's a version in the good old summertime with Judy Garland and Van Johnson. I think that was late 40s, 48, 49. And then there was a Broadway musical in 63 called She Loves Me, which is also based on this. But actually, I think it's all based on The Shop Around the Corner. Yeah, because, you know, that was the massive success.
Yeah, it was a huge hit. It made, you were looking at the figures, it made how much money?
It made over $3 million on a $500,000 budget. Yeah.
In 1940.
In 1940. So that was a very, very big hit for the period.
The reason I say that the central similarity is the thing about the relationship, and you're right to point out that there are structural similarities that run through it. But actually, I have seen Shop Around the Corner before. I hadn't seen You've Got Mail before. And rewatching Shop Around the Corner as we did just now, it made me realise that the romantic story is much, much smaller as a kind of proportion of Shop Around the Corner than it is in You've Got Mail. It is the whole thing and everything feeds into it. In this, there's a lot going on with Mr. Manichet, the guy who runs the shop, and his relationship with his wife. All the peripheral characters have much bigger roles and their own stories.
Well, I mean, that is part of why I think it's a vastly superior film. You know, so, I mean, I don't know how you want to deal with this, because I think You've Got Mail, to me, is very charming and enjoyable, you know, and I really like Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks in it, you know, and I love the location. I mean, the film is as much about New York as it is about anything else, you know, but it's very narrow. Yeah, it is about them meeting and falling in love, and also it's ideologically suspect in a way that this one isn't, right? It's all about reconciling kind of big business. It's it's saying, you know, big business is inevitable, you know, it's going to kind of kill off all the small businesses and we have to be for it, rather than it being a critique of it, which I think is really unacceptable, you know. So the reason why I think that The Shop Around the Corner is a vastly superior film is because of what you mentioned, that it is about so many things. You know, it's about a middle-aged man, who finds out that his wife doesn't want to grow old with him, you know, and the sadness that he has about that, right? It's about living in a time where people are desperate to keep their job, and where people are like almost fainting from hunger and don't have enough to eat, you know, the desperation that you see in people both wanting to get the job, like in the Margaret Sullivan character, and then holding on to their job, like Pirovich, who has got a family, who's got to support, and because of that, he has to put up with all this shit, you know, from this boss. You know, that's a story. It's about a culture in which people have to pay for doctors. And it's a worry and it's a concern, right? There's so many things going on. It's about, people also selling themselves for money, right? The whole point of the Vadash character is, he's a gigolo. But why is he a gigolo? Why is he going out with this old woman for money? Yeah. So
all of that is superior. I think that the romantic story is inferior to You've Got Mail. I think it benefits in You've Got Mail from being the focus.
I disagree. I was very moved by it. I was moved by so many aspects of it in a way that You've Got Mail doesn't move me. And also, I think Margaret Sullivan. I mean, and James Stewart for that matter. Kind of the way that Margaret Sullivan reads that letter. Yeah, and then he says this, and all the facial gestures that she does with it are just like sublime, yeah? And there are moments even, when she goes into the mailbox and she touches the sides, yeah, and then she looks in to see there's no letter, you feel like, her crushed, right? And also, very importantly, it's gender balanced at a time when that wasn't even a consideration. Whereas actually the problem with You've Got Mail is it's all on his side, right? So, the shop around the corner has that beautiful ending, which is almost cruel, the way that you expect people to be cruel, actually. Where he says, I've met Matthias, his name is Popkin, first deflation, right? Then he's overweight, second deflection. He's being so mean, right? And then, he's going to need your wages to live on, right? So he makes her go through all of that, which is quite mean, right? But then she's got the last word, right? Like, show me your legs. Yeah, and the decision is hers.
Well, right? Yes, I quite agree with this. This is something I wanted to get onto, because I think one of the real problems I have with You've Got Mail, which I didn't actually enormously get on with, is that Joe Fox, Fox, is a dick. And I really don't like him. And I think this... I was very keen to revisit Shop Around the Corner to see, how that relationship's handled, because was he a dick in the original? And in some sense, to some degree, he is a dick in the same sorts of ways, but he's much more of a dick in You've Got Mail. So for instance, as you say, they share the film shared the thing of the guy discovers before the girl that he uncovers the identity, he knows. And it happens outside the cafe where he's with his friend. In this, I forget the actor's name, but it's
James Stewart.
No, the friend.
That is Felix Bressard, who plays Pirovich.
Yeah, he's the guy who said it'll be a terrific laugh.
Yes,
isn't it?
In To Be or Not to Be.
In To Be or Not to Be. So he's with the friend. He's the friend in that, and it's Dave Chappelle in You've Got Mail.
Yes.
And the guy is there going, just take a look at her. Tell me if she's hot or if she's ugly. And they have a look, and then the line comes out. If you don't like the name of the girl, you're not going to like this girl. Why? Because it is this girl. And upon discovering that, your man goes into the cafe pretending to just, happen to see you here, and starts basically being mean to the girl. Teasing her, but she has no idea. She's expecting this guy to come. He invites himself into a conversation with her. In both films, I find that a really cruel, mean thing to do, and not charming. And I think the film want you to feel that it's funny, and I really don't. Well, the films share that.
They also share a very different turning point.
Yeah,
because I think the idea of Alfred Kralik, the James Stewart character, is that he's going to reveal himself, and she's just being too impatient. She's too nervous, and you understand her, and you understand him, because he is going to reveal himself. And then there's that moment where you really feel his pain. Where he says, you insignificant little clerk, right? And that is like completely mean and crushing. She's so mean, right? And that's when he,
decides not to.
Yeah, and he just leaves, because actually he is just a clerk, and, he is insignificant. And if she can't, go for him, then she's right, Yeah. So, but it's a very cruel thing to say. Right?
Sure. And in You've Got Mail, the line is, because he's a huge business owner in that, who's threatening to swallow her company,
yes.
And put her out of business, which he in the end does. and the line is more along the lines of you're a broken person inside, being a big businessman. But I still think it's basically a cruel thing to do, the way that the men handle that scene in both films. But as it goes on, Joe in You've Got Mail carries on for ages and really appears to take some glee. And the relationship interpersonally between Joe and I forget the character's name, Meg Ryan's character, is much more vile than it is between the two of them in The Shop Around the Corner. And, you really feel the sparks going between them. They do not like each other at all. And he really, really takes some glee in kind of lording over her, kind of what he knows, and teasing her about this guy who didn't show up and so on and so forth. But then he turns it into ingratiating himself into her company when it gets to, you should tell him this, and they start hanging out and they keep, quote unquote, bumping into each other. Shall we bump into each other tomorrow, and so on. I think gaslighting is going too far, but it's cruel, manipulative behaviour. It's dishonest. And by the end, when he reveals himself to her through the dog, whatever the name is, Barkley or whatever, and she realises it's him, and she goes, I wanted it to be you. I wanted it to be you so badly. You're going, why?
Why? Yeah.
You hate this guy. Yeah. And even if you started to like him through this manipulative sort of campaign he was waging on you for the last sort of act of the film, once it's revealed that, you may have suspected it and wanted it, but once it's revealed that he was lying, why would you be okay with that? It's really not nice.
No.
And I don't buy it at all.
No.
I buy it more in this. It's much more gentle in this.
Yes.
And actually their relationship, like I say, they're not going at each other to nearly the extent that they are in You've Got Mail.
No, and they're very considerate, and you have more background. So, throughout the film, you sense his attraction towards her, really from the beginning. And then she reveals that, you could have swept me off my feet, right?
Yeah.
And we get an explanation as to why she behaved the way that she did, right? Because she wanted to hook him, and she thought the way of doing it was to behave like an actress, right? So, and then you see the gentleness in the James Stewart character, actually, when she's ill and he's concerned, and there is, it's a much more rounded kind of depiction of people entering a relationship, which is full of misunderstandings and so on, but it's also full of feeling. You understand what draws them to each other, right? And actually why they belong with each other, and why they'll have a kind of, a sparky, tension-filled but loving relationship after, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, the thing that upset is the wrong word, but put me off You've Got Mail, and I do find it very charming. But it's the sense where, to explain the relationship, one of the characters tells her, I knew you would end up together or something like that because, he's so ruthless, and the only person I know more ruthless than him is you. And you think, really?
Mm.
Yeah, kind of as if that's a good thing.
And also, she's not. Yeah. Do you see her being ruthless, really?
No.
Actually, I think what she sort of exemplifies is something that really maybe the reason I don't get on with a lot of romantic comedies of sort of this era onwards, of kind of like, I suppose, When Harry Met Sally onward, is the women being... if you compare it to the films of like the 1940s, the women are much more wily, they're bolder, they have more agency, they're more empowered.
Yes.
There's much more kind of equality in the dynamics between the men and the women. In fact, it may even be more sort of female heavy, especially in the Screwball.
Well, actually, I think the thing is that in this film, for example, there's a disparity in gender. You know that the men make more money and that they have more power, right, socially and in terms of money. It's very obvious in this film. But also, when you're looking at Clara, you know that she's a poor working girl who's supporting her mother and her aunt, right? And they live alone, and that's the desperation for the job. She's a working woman. And she's a working woman who's worked at all of these different places and who's had to leave all of those different places. And you know why, right? When she says, I worked in Novak and Sons or whatever, or Novak Brothers and Sons, and the brothers were fine, but the sons were fine, but the brothers, right? Like, yeah, I kind of, she is constantly being sexually harassed, right? Yeah. So kind of the film brings out, or the shop around the corner brings out all of those elements.
It also brings out that wiliness I just mentioned, where when she gets the job, because she's desperate for the job and she's not going to happen, and then she takes on the singing cigarette box, the musical cigarette box, and sells it to the woman by finding a selling point for it and then marking up the price enormously, and the woman, and that speaks to, you can't imagine Meg Ryan's character doing something like that, and you wonder how she's running a bookshop that makes $350,000 a year.
Yes. So what I prefer is, well, first of all, the class basis. I mean, the shop around the corner is a film for working people. It is about working people, right? And it doesn't look at the bosses negatively, but it also very clearly demonstrates they have all the power, right? Like, there's no two ways about it, right? So it's kind of clear-headed about that. It shows all of the interrelationships amongst these characters. It's kind of, and aside from everything else, it's got like, a million jokes that work terrifically. I want your honest opinion. And actually, it does almost jokes on every level possible, right? It does so through the repetition, through lines of dialogue, through physical things, through actually the tone of voice. Yeah, kind of when Frank Morgan's saying, is it too much to ask? It's like, I ask my employees, and he does it in a raised voice, and then a customer comes in and he says, what can I do for you, in a soft voice? And then as soon as he leaves, the timing of that is terrific. He raises his voice again. It does visual comedy when he hides himself behind the cash register. When he's talking on the phone. It's like every variety of joke imaginable, practically, you get.
Though I do think that the way that it's sort of shot and visually conceptualized really belies or betrays, whichever the word is, its origin as a play. I think. I think you mentioned on Facebook last night that you were watching You've Got Mail, and then a whole conversation erupted. And so it's a film that obviously people have a relationship with. It means a lot to them.
People love this film, yeah.
And one of the things that you said at one point is not a single remarkable shot or not a single poetic shot, something like that, right? Which I think is true if You've Got Mail, but I think that's also true of the shop around the corner.
You see, honestly. I don't think so, because there's a few shots. So the thing about Lubitsch is, he's not somebody who's show-offy with images, right? So he's not like Orson Welles, who'll do a tour de force with a sweeping camera or anything like that. But actually, he creates images that are very, very memorable and very moving. Yeah, so I mentioned that shot of Margaret Sullivan with her hand in the postbox and then with her eye. Yeah, we see her through the other side of the postbox.
That's true.
That's an amazing image. The lopsided Christmas tree, it's kind of, I think an amazing image. The shot of the suicide, which you just see off screen, with the light crashing, that to me is like kind of really memorable. It's an amazing way of not showing you something.
Sure.
I love the way that James Stewart is sexualized in this, right? Because he's not a very sexy man. And yet you look at the way that he's filmed in this, right? And you notice his eyelashes, or the light is always hitting his lip, or, kind of, there's an attention to the image, actually, in this film. So I think he does have a lot of poetic imagery. If you just compare the way that the conversation in the cafe is filmed, it's staged in each of the films, you'll see how Lubitsch, without drawing attention to himself, is doing amazing things. The conversation back to back.
Well, that is repeated in You've Got Mail as well.
Well,
they do so back to back, and you have a shot.
But look at the shots. No.
Well, go on then.
I don't remember, that tightness of the shot kind of, beautifully composed in a medium close-up, with them talking to each other and facing in other directions. You see it in I've Got Mail in a wider shot and at a slight angle, which doesn't have the same effect.
We'd have to go back and check the actual shot, which I'm not that interested in doing right now. But I remember in You've Got Mail it being when he goes to sit down behind her. I do remember there being the same symmetrical side-on shot, but I think maybe it then goes into cutting between their faces, which it doesn't here. One thing that I really do like about the way that this is shot and edited is how much single take there is.
Yes.
It allows you to see the performance, especially with a roving camera as well that moves through the shop. I really like, you get to see the performances, but I also do think that means that the opportunity for kind of more interesting compositions is maybe lost to some degree. So, some of it, none of it is ugly or anything like that. I mean, I wouldn't go that far at all. But some of it is really plain. That sounds very cruel.
Well,
but, just people stood there for the camera to.
No, plain is a good way of describing this, but plain for me as in just right. And actually, I think you've hit on it. So in a way, the original Shop Around the Corner is based on a play, but the camera's always moving and creating rhythms and speeding up and slowing down. The ending, which is done in a series of long takes, punctuated by the shutting of a light, is beautiful, right? That moment where Margaret Sullivan hears that, she's going to be supporting this fat old man called Popkin, and she sits down and the camera goes down with her. And you get this sense that her life has been extinguished. It's so expressive as a shot, right? So you're not looking at some razzle-dazzle like image, but actually everything's just right. The jokes that repeat. By the third time when they say, I want your honest opinion, you don't even need to see Pirovich's face. His feet going back up the stairs is enough.
Yeah.
I mean, all of that is genius filmmaking. It doesn't have to do fireworks for you.
No, sure. I think that's all fair. Can I say one thing that I think is genuinely better handled in You've Got Mail than this, which I think is actually very poorly handled in this, is the sequence, or in this actually it's just a shot, a long take, where they're outside the restaurant, outside the cafe, looking in. Because in this, in the Shop Around the Corner, it's handled in a single shot. You don't get any cut into the girl they're looking at, or the girl he's looking at, and then reveals. Whereas that's what you get in You've Got Mail, right? He's looking through the window, and you get the eyeline shot, looking at Meg Ryan, and then it's revealed that it's Meg Ryan, and you cut back out. Whereas in this, just in one take, you just see the two of them stood outside, and I think you need the shot of her. You're just relying on the dialogue here. Oh, it looks like her. Oh, it is her. I think you need to see what they're seeing.
Well, I don't agree.
I really think that, and because actually, the other part is in the Shop Around the Corner. That's the revelation that this is the girl. You may well suspect that beforehand. In fact, maybe there were trailers where it was part of the selling point. Yeah. But that's supposed to be the revelation in this. You're not told before then concretely. Oh, it's Margaret Sullivan. Whereas from the start, and You've Got Mail who they are.
That's the problem. I think that's the problem with You've Got Mail, because actually, I think the conversation between Kralik and Pirovich, just the rhythms of it, is funnier than it is. In You've Got Mail. And for me, it has to do with that. Well, it is her,
Yeah, but I think you need the insert, because at that point, this is the film confirming to you as the audience that this is her.
I don't agree.
I need to see it. Show me. Really?
But actually, that's part of the way that the film creates tension and so on, because you don't see it until he tells it. And then immediately after he tells it, you see it.
No, you don't. That's what I'm saying. You don't. When he says it looks like her, oh, it is her, you don't get an insert. What happens is...
I agree that we don't get an insert, but eventually he goes in.
Yeah, eventually he goes in and see her. But it's not... But again, it should be... I think it needs a shot there. I think it needs an insert there.
Well, I don't, because you actually know it. Beforehand. He's writing letters, she's writing letters. So I think you don't need that. And you don't get it, but what you do get is a series of rhythms that land as a joke. And kind of a much better joke than in You've Got Mail. So I don't agree with that either.
I mean, the joke is the same in You've Got Mail, and I don't think it works any worse in You've Got Mail.
I think it does. I think the timing is better, and I think part of the reason why the timing is better is because there's no cuts.
I disagree. I disagree. I really think I was missing that shot there that just confirms. Oh, this is what he's seeing. I think that is missing from that version.
Well,
What I really hate about the one in You've Got Mail is the reaction of Joe Fox, who starts celebrating. Yes, she's hot. Oh, like the most important thing in the world is that she's sexy. Yeah. And it's like, oh, you are a dick. I hate you. You're such a tool.
You see, I mean, the thing is that the accent on Shop Around the Corner is on feeling, on love of literature, on what literature tells us about being human that they both share, right? So it's about establishing a world of shared ideals, of like-mindedness, right? And of course, that theoretically is also the case, with You've Got Mail. Except, as you say, then so much of the emphasis is on, the looks. And of course the looks are mentioned. We're told how pretty Clara is, but not too pretty, right? So all of that, I think, is just so much better for me. The film puts this accent on feeling is so important, and also, I think, from the moment, I mean, again, here talking just about cinematic devices and the use of them, and making them expressive, such little delicate things in You've Got Mail. When James Stewart first asked Perovich, look, listen to this, right? And his voice hushes as he reads the letter. And it's almost like by hushing the voice, you get into a world of feeling. It's almost like a musical number in a way, but dreamy and hushed. There's nothing like that in You've Got Mail.
No, absolutely. I think the performances and the direction of the performances is a lot better in the Shop Around the Corner, and it's much more evocative. And that entire segment in the centre where Mr. Manischek sacks James Stewart, and he slowly, solemnly says all his goodbyes to the staff and gives them, says something to them all, leaves, and the scene just keeps on going. Right, it doesn't just end; it keeps on moving. Then the staff are told, "Don't bother. You can all go home now." So they all rush to go home and go to their parties or whatever they're doing. And then it still doesn't end, and then the kid comes in, and eventually the kid, that's when he walks into the office and sees Mr. Manischek with a gun to his head. You don't see it, and then you go in and you just see Mr. Manischek having been saved from suicide with this look on his face. It's like, this is a film that, if this is a romantic comedy that has a sort of central scene that ends on a suicide attempt around Christmas.
Yes.
And there's such a drop in mood, and it's so deftly handled.
Yes.
And there's nothing could, you couldn't imagine that in You've Got Mail. Everything there is geared towards the laugh and the charm.
Yeah, something that's just occurred to me, actually, after seeing Shop Around the Corner so many times over so many years, and you've made me think of it, so, is the way that the film so beautifully charts different kinds of love throughout the course of its film. So on the one hand, Clara and Alfred are falling in love, and and hating each other and so on, right? But that's the relationship that's blooming, right? On the other hand, you have Mr. and Mrs. Matichek, which is the relationship that's dying, right? Then you also have the gigolo, which is like, doing it for money, right? Then you also have a sense, that Ilona, one of the women clerks, is also, she's getting a bit old or whatever, but that she's also having sex with money for reasons that are not necessarily to do with love, right? Mm-hmm. Her silver fox at the beginning, stole. And then of course you have Pepe, right? You see that girl over there? I'm her Santa Claus, who's beginning to date, and and then the happily married man in it, right? Like, so you think how beautifully structured the film is, that it kind of shows you all of these different kinds of relationships, at almost every stage in human life or something, and of different kinds. Nothing like that in You've Got Mail, right?
No, it's really narrowly focused on the two of them. They do have their partners who, relationships end up breaking up so that the main two can come together.
Yes.
Which actually was kind of interesting where Meg Ryan breaks up with Greg Kinnear. because Greg Kinnear has sort of fallen for this TV personality who's into him, and he takes her to a cafe to break up, and this thing of, oh, I don't love you, and it's very awkward, he doesn't know how to get the words out, but you really feel like he's an honest person ultimately who's just fallen for someone else. And he says, I don't love you anymore, and she said, I don't love you anymore, and immediately it's like, it's kind of fine. And I thought it was an interesting scene because you can sort of see that, like, there's something very plausible about, actually it being okay that two people realise, oh, actually we're not right for each other anymore, and that's okay. And that leap from the awkwardness of being the one to have to say this to finding out that actually this is just the right thing, we both get it, is kind of nice.
Yes. I don't know. I mean, I thought that so many of those things in You've Got Mail were stunty. Yeah, they didn't feel real, and they didn't connect, and they didn't feel organic, right? So the stepmother who makes a pass at him, right, and then runs off with the nanny. Yeah, like kind of. So it's almost like each of those elements is meant to be a joke, right? But they somehow doesn't connect to get together with a person, or at least it doesn't to me.
I'll tell you one thing that does, and this goes back to Joe being a dick, is when he says he's broken up with the Parker Posey character.
Yeah.
He breaks up with her and then he tells his dad, and his dad says something like, can I get a number, or would she be into me, or something like that. And it's just a joke. It is just a joke, but you also get like, oh, this is who this guy's dad is. That's why he is who he is.
Yeah.
I know that, like, Joe is a dick because his dad is a dick.
Yeah. Well, there is that. Anyway, perhaps I've talked too much about, because I do think that The Shop Around the Corner is one of the masterpieces of cinema, and I don't think that You've Got Mail is.
No.
Yeah, which is not to say that I think You've Got Mail is a bad or unenjoyable film. Yeah, it has a lot of pleasures. And, New York is one of them. I do actually very much like Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan in it, and I particularly love the soundtrack. I actually think that the soundtrack, to me, makes the movie.
Yes.
The soundtrack and the locations make the movie. Because the soundtrack is absolutely brilliant. And sometimes it brings energy or feeling where actually the film itself is not conveying it. It's being conveyed through the music. Yeah.
I think it's something that I said to you before. I forget which film it was, and you disagreed at the time. But I said, bringing in this piece of music at this point is cheating. Because I think actually it was a Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Portrait of a Young Girl on Fire, where it's Vivaldi at the end, Summer. The presto from it, and it's so powerful that, like, you could play that over anything and it'd be powerful. At the end of this, when Somewhere Over the Rainbow plays that version, and it's very beautiful. Very beautiful, and they see each other, that made me feel something, and I'm going, the only reason I'm feeling something is because of this music.
I felt that way at that very moment as well.
Yeah.
Because before I was admiring the music, it's got a great soundtrack, right? And kind of I was just like enjoying it really previously. But at that moment, I thought this feeling should be coming from the scene, not from this music.
The music is telling me that this scene is romantic, and actually I've been so suspicious of this relationship all along that I do not think it is, and I resent the music making me feel something.
Well, I wasn't so angry at it, though. I do, that line of "I hoped it was you" or whatever the line is.
I wanted it to be you.
I wanted it to be you. I thought, what a betrayal of the original premise, like. At least Clara has her self-respect. Yeah, she's willing to be single and continue supporting her mother, and her aunt, right, if she doesn't fall truly in love and if, her partner isn't who she wants it to be. Whereas, like, I wish it was you, really.
What you get in this, what you get in You've Got Mail, which you get a lot less of in The Shop Around the Corner, is reading from the correspondence.
Yes.
You listen to them as they are corresponding live, like they are sending emails to each other like that, so they're not waiting for letters to come back and forth through the post. And at one point, like I say, they start using instant messenger as well. It's not just email. And it's like there's like a kind of Sex and the City voiceover as they're composing, the emails. I think that's quite effective, though. It with Joe's character in particular, there's something psychopathic about, like, the version of himself that is his inner monologue and his private self, and the version of himself that is this ruthless businessman. Like they are such different people. Although there is that one point where I think it's quite early on where he says, "Oh, I'm a businessman," and then he starts giving shop girl, as she is, advice on how to keep this big business from destroying hers. And he says, "You've got to be ruthless. It's not personal. It's business." That's a line that keeps coming back.
Yes.
So they're not. He's not a completely different person in private to the public persona, but
I mean, the whole thing about The Godfather is something that I'm always very suspicious of. Yeah, because it's not the first movie to kind of where characters live their life by quotes from The Godfather, right? That's almost a trope in films and television shows of the last 20 years. But there's something very unattractive about those films and television shows that do.
Yeah.
Right? Because, the whole thing about The Godfather is it's meant to be a critique of America and capitalism, and actually the way that the characters behave in The Godfather itself is seen as being very bad, right? Whereas actually kind of, here you have the Greg Kinnear character and the Tom Hanks character, like quoting lines from The Godfather as if it's a code of ethics to live by. I mean,
this bit really made me laugh, and I think it is more resonant now than it was then. The Godfather bit, because they're having this online correspondence, and it's just these short messages going back and forth, and then he says the line from The Godfather, and she says, "What's that?" And he says, "Oh, you don't know The Godfather? Oh, every line in it is meaningful. This line means this line means that. Every line in it," and it's a long message, and I'm like, I know this guy. I've been this guy. I've been the guy who sits there telling people for 4 hours what The Godfather means. Do you know what I mean? And actually not The Godfather, because I don't know The Godfather that well, but that kind of thing.
Yes.
And women are so used to hearing that, like, more now than ever. And there's a brilliant article on McSweeney's, which is called, it's by Ali Elkin, and it's called "An Oral History of Quentin Tarantino as Told to Me by Men I've Dated." And the idea is, like, she's never seen Pulp Fiction, but every guy she's dated has told her what a brilliant film it is and gone on at length.
Yes.
It's a really, really good article worth reading, and like, this is exactly that.
Right.
And also, it reminded me of a bit in what's the Gwyneth Paltrow one, Sliding Doors, which came out at around the same time, I think, 97, 98, something like that. Where the main character, the male love interest, quotes the Spanish Inquisition scene from Monty Python at length. He doesn't do anything with it, he just quotes it, and his friends laugh. And Gwyneth Paltrow laughs. He's like, Gwyneth Paltrow is not seduced by that. No, I can tell you, no woman is seduced by quoting Monty Python. You know what I mean? And it's the same sort of thing, like this. Well, actually, I was going to say this has been written by a guy. This is what guys think. This was written by a woman,
yes.
2 women, and apparently this. Well, to be fair, she's not seduced by it. She doesn't question it. She believes it. So that's what I think is unrealistic about The Godfather. But here, she takes the advice, whereas she should be going, "Oh God, fuck this guy." Yeah. But it reminded me of that. Like it struck me, even if it didn't mean to, it struck me as very, very true to life that guys just get tunnel vision about doing that.
Sure.
I've just done, in a way.
Yes, and that could be seen as a critique in the film, right? It's true. I mean, it's interesting, because Nora Ephron is a very interesting person, as a writer and as a personality and as a humorist, really. And she comes from a long line of, screenwriters. Her parents were screenwriters. But... yeah, I don't know. Maybe the reason also why she was so successful is because she's so uncritical of everything that is successful, including The Godfather.
Do you think that the Starbucks thing is...
product placement?
No, I wasn't going to say that. It might well be.
It definitely was.
I was going to say more subversive than initially, because the central conflict superficially between the main characters in You've Got Mail is that Meg Ryan owns a small children's bookshop, and Tom Hanks runs the giant sort of Waterstones type, actually these days would be more like an Amazon, bookshop that is coming in and taking everything over. It's building a massive store. It's going to cannibalize the entire area. And she's very, very against that. But ultimately, she gets put out of business, and she's angry, but she doesn't seem to suffer any initial or any immediate financial burden.
And neither do any of her staff, seemingly.
Yeah, so there's that. But
though, isn't there a line that they all go to work for Fox or something?
Yeah, I think so. Which is well, actually, something similar happened in Black Books, which was the Channel 4 sitcom about a small bookshop, and then a giant bookshop called Goliath Books opens next door, and they all, I think, some of them go work for that. So the giant bookshop comes in, and big kind of faceless capitalism is bad. and keeping the small independent bookshop alive is good. But she goes to Starbucks, and as you say, right, this is product placement. Like, there's no way this is not a moneyed transaction between Starbucks and the producers. But is it kind of, Starbucks is like kind of the archetypal, or at least was at the time, the archetypal company that was coming in and putting independent coffee shops out of business.
Yes.
Is there something about that is it more subversive than it seems, that she believes one thing in one part of her life, but in the other she's happy to get the $2.50 mochaccino?
Well, you just don't think that she's thoughtful enough to be kind of critical in those ways. That she actually probably hasn't given any thought except insofar.
Do you mean the filmmaker or the character?
Well, both. Right.
Yeah.
So the character insofar as it affects herself, and the film is pro business like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not at all critical of Fox. Why would it be critical of Starbucks?
Yeah, and what happens at the end, right, is because they fall in love and it's all great. Isn't there a bit in the big giant bookshop, the Fox bookshop, that is like the corner that Meg Ryan reads to kids in? Isn't there like a bit of that?
Well,
so it's like it kind of...
That's set up from the beginning of the film. So every bit of the bookshop is working except that, because they have that competition. Once the competition is over, that bit of Fox Books becomes like the shop around the corner. And so, the film is basically telling you nothing is being lost. And actually, aren't these big shops better anyway? They have big chairs and, you can sit there and while away the day and, and so on. Actually, Lawrence was very interesting about this, and, it could very well be true. In my experience, it's not true, because... you used to go into these little corner bookshops and everyone would know all the books they owned, and they would recommend things and they would get them for you and you could have a chat and so on. I mean, that has never been my experience in big chain Waterstones or whatever. Even when they did have comfy sofas and whatever, I've never, other people have, I acknowledge, whiled away the day there or whatever, but it's never felt cozy and intimate, and you having an exchange over the years with people, like I had with other bookshops, particularly in my youth. But Lawrence very interestingly pointed out that type of bookshop has grown and died in our lifetime.
The big corporate bookshop.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Amazon and online retailing.
So we've lived through the period where, that huge Waterstone thing ate up all the little bookshops. The little bookshops disappeared, and now the big chain shops have disappeared because of Amazon. So that period actually didn't last very long.
No.
Which is a different kind of argument, I suppose, but an interesting one.
One thing that I really liked about You've Got Mail is that I liked the supporting turns, which aren't given nearly as much space as they are in The Shop Around the Corner, where they're given whole storylines.
Yes.
But in this, particularly, let me find the name.
It's got a great comic supporting cast.
Heather Burns, who plays Christina, who's the kind of the slowish girl who works in the children's bookshop, is wonderful. I don't remember any particular line she has, but I love her presence and her style and her tone. She does very much the same thing in Miss Congeniality a couple of years later, where she plays kind of a slow but very friendly, girl who's lovely. And Steve Zahn,
yes,
who plays George, is fantastic. And he's got the first line that I laughed at, which is where he comes in. They're talking about cybersex, and he comes in and they ask him, and he just stands there and says, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's just another way to the internet's just another way to get rejected by women."
Yes.
And it's wonderful. And he has a real Gen X. Like, actually, he's kind of out of place. He's like a West Coast surfer, grunge guy almost.
Yeah.
Or transplanted into New York, but he really works, and I like him a lot. And actually, he has the other line that I really loved, which is not a comic line. It's where Joe comes in to sort of inspect this bookshop at the start, and he's looking at some book that's autographed and very expensive and whatever.
Yes,
and he says,
I remember that line.
And he goes, "Oh, that's why it costs so much." And Steve Zahn goes, "That's why it's worth so much."
Yeah.
Which is a great line and really insightful and perceptive. I like that.
I love Jean Stapleton, the old lady accountant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she brought an incredible amount of warmth, and the sense of a real person, into what is really a nothing of a part. I also love Dabney Coleman, who is Tom Hanks's father. Because he's got that superficial, and he has a great way with a line as well. So it has a great supporting cast, but it just doesn't add up to the warmth, the truth, the sense of a life and of people living it and an insight into it. And also, it doesn't have jokes, No,
not as many, and mostly not as good.
Yeah,
it's got some.
It's got some. Yeah.
I mean, it's got more than some. Let's be fair, and there's a reason that the film was such a huge success, which it was.
Yeah.
It made $250 million.
Yes.
In 1998,
which was a lot of money. It was a sociological phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
The film.
And someone was saying on your Facebook feed that they were just watching an episode of Friends that happened to have a reference to it in it.
Yes.
Like it was everywhere.
Yeah, it was everywhere.
Friends, I suppose, also shares that thing of sort of very well-off people in New York who, no matter what their job situation, they always seem to have enough money, enough time.
Yes.
So how's that?
Yes, it's a film made for them.
Yeah. The last thing I want to think about, and I'm asking if you have any thoughts about it, is the comparison between Hanks and Stewart, not as performers in these particular films, but as actors and personas more generally. Like I think they are kind of compared. I think.
Well, I think they're both very warm everyman, right? I love them both. I think they're both very good. I mean, I do think James Stewart is fantastic in this. I think as actors, each of them is considered like the great everyman actor of his generation. I think James Stewart had more range. I think James Stewart did screwball comedies, right? And he did romantic comedies, which Tom Hanks does. He did serious drama, which Tom Hanks does. But then, James Stewart did, he was a Western star,
Tom Hanks has done a Western.
You can't quite imagine Tom Hanks in a Western, really.
No.
So, I mean, I think that's the only way, I like Tom Hanks more in some ways, because with Tom Hanks you always get a sense of an intelligence, right, that is not the most striking thing about James Stewart, particularly in his later years, right? He
does kind of grasping for trying to understand what's going on quite well.
Yeah. But also, you never get the sense of evilness and anger if you think of Vertigo, that sense of possessive jealousy, desire. You've never seen that in Tom Hanks either. So, the vengeance and nastiness, you see in some of the Anthony Mann Westerns. I've never seen Tom Hanks do that. I could have missed something, and also that kind of just possessive jealousy, desire that you see in stuff like Vertigo. I've never seen Tom Hanks do that either.
I recorded a podcast very recently with Russell Bailey, who I went to uni with. He does a podcast called Not Just for Kids, and we spoke about Indiana Jones and more generally Spielberg on it. And I was talking about the most recent Spielbergs that I've really loved, really enjoyed, have been with Tom Hanks. The Post, Bridge of Spies. I love Catch Me If You Can as well, which is a little bit older. And I think there's something about them two together which is wonderful. But there's something that I'm very suspicious of when the two of them are together, which is like because they are so giving me something that's comfortable.
Always.
I'm very suspicious about that. Do you think that's something that James Stewart ever?
No, I think James Stewart made you uncomfortable in some of the things. You got a real sense of anger and vengeance and meanness in some of the parts that he played. And actually, I see that as a problem with both Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg. And that's the reason why we feel differently about The Post and The Bridge. I just kind of think it's too comfortable. Your words are right. I agree with that. But I think that's also true of some of Tom Hanks' performances.
Well, that's kind of where I was going. Yeah, like is that it's this thing about the everyman with Tom Hanks, I think it's really, really right to say I can't think of a villainous performance, or at least a great villainous performance. He may have done small parts, and in this, I suppose, I consider him kind of a villain in You've Got Mail, but that's not what he's supposed to be.
No.
He's supposed to be charming and romantic and so on.
And also, I think you can see somebody like Tom Hanks maybe at his greatest do something like It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah. But I can't really see him do the nastier edged Western roles. I just can't.
I'm just looking at Tom Hanks's films just to see if anything villainous stands out. I bet there won't be a thing.
And let me get James Stewart's filmography out, and I'll give you a whole list.
A lot of his earlier stuff I don't actually know Tom Hanks, but I don't think anything stands out. When you get to Sleepless in Seattle, Philadelphia, Forrest Gump, Apollo 13, Toy Story, Saving Private Ryan, You've Got Mail, The Green Mile, Castaway. He's the guy on Road to Perdition. I haven't seen Road to Perdition. This is what I'm saying. So I don't think it went down amazingly well. Made good money, but. And is he supposed to be villainous in that? I think that was supposed to be the film where he was doing something different.
And yet, if you look at things like The Naked Spur, right, or even The Man Who Knew Too Much, the Hitchcock film, yeah, and then if you compare that to Vertigo, An Anatomy of a Murder. Right, that's a whole range that I think we haven't seen in Tom Hanks. So, we've seen the Frank Capra, James Stewart style in Tom Hanks, but we haven't seen neither the Hitchcock nor the Anthony Mann side of James Stewart.
Of Tom Hanks.
Of Tom Hanks, yes.
Yeah, no, I'm just looking through it. It's very... Unless Larry Crown or Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close have kind of villainous aspects, which I don't know. Charlie Wilson's War, I don't know. I don't think so, though. Cloud Atlas had some kind of villainous-ish parts, but then there are lots of parts in that. It's not really... Doesn't really... Captain Phillips, Saving Mr. Banks, Bridge of Spies, Sully. I mean, Sully is the all-American hero. He stopped the... he did the anti-9/11, saving the plane from hitting any buildings in New York. Oh, and then he ended up playing Mr. Rogers. I mean, Jesus. And everyone's going, oh, he's perfect for it. Well, of course he is.
Of course he is. Let me just dig something up.
Yeah.
So this is a description of The Naked Spur, where Stewart plays a bounty hunter who tries to bring a murderer to justice and is forced to accept the help of two strangers who are less than trustworthy. Kemp, played by James Stewart, it's revealed that he's no lawman and that the bottom of the wanted poster for him offers $5,000 to whoever brings him in. You get a real kind of dark and a dark side to the Western hero that James Stewart brings, that has a fierceness and an anger, and a kind of a lawlessness that you don't see in Tom Hanks.
No, I think the Vertigo comparison is a really apt one. Like, there is no Vertigo for Tom Hanks, and you can't really imagine there being one. Even though in this, I do see him as kind of a psychopath stalker.
Yes,
he's not meant to be.
He's meant to be a charming kind of romantic comedy hero. All right, so. We've seen both The Shop Around the Corner and You've Got Mail, both very recently. I've very much enjoyed both, though I do think that Shop Around the Corner is one of the sublime masterpieces of cinema. I don't know how often I've seen it, and I still laugh at every joke, actually. It's so interesting because the surprise, you know the punchline, and it still moves me very deeply, actually. Particularly the Frank Morgan character. It kind of, I think, the older I get, the more I identify with him. So, yeah.
Yeah. I liked Shop Around the Corner more than You've Got Mail. I appreciate the everything that the surrounding cast is given to do. I do think the romantic story would focus from a slightly bigger focus, but I kind of by the by. You've Got Mail has its charms as well, and I've maybe not been that fair to them, but they are there. But for the most part, I think it's kind of emblematic of something about modern romantic comedies that I just don't get on with very much.
I love modern romantic comedies. I mean, and you can't expect all of them to be, as great as The Shop Around the Corner. But, I do think that certainly You've Got Mail has very low expectations in relation to what The Shop Around the Corner actually provides, which is not just a romance, but it's a depiction of a whole world, really, and a critique of it, which definitely You've Got Mail, in my view, does not provide. Thank you very much for listening. We are Eavesdropping at the Movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, I think, all the podcast providers. And our social media is Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies. And our website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.